Hello, this is the October meetup of Princeton CA. We've got a special guest, Richard. So this is the part 2. We already had part 1. So the audience had lots of questions, and this is an interactive session. So I'll hand over to Richard.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. So in relation to your question about using Jira for SAFe, we have a number of partners who have solved how to configure Jira and other tools like that necessarily weren't designed for SAFe to use them with SAFe, and they work quite well. We also have a large partner network of tooling partners that specialize in SAFe, who have developed their applications just for using SAFe. And so, for example, like we have a couple of partners who integrate with Jira and other tools like that. So you can continue using Jira, but then use their tools for things like their portfolio, Kanban, and other areas where Jira wasn't specifically designed.
I guess I don't understand between SAFe and Jira. You don't have to answer my question.
Jira is a tool, but SAFe is a framework. It's the.
So I guess Agile.
Oh, okay, which is actually a question here too. So
yes. Okay.
Okay, so Agile is a umbrella of different frameworks to work in a different way. So typically, when we say we're Agile, it means we're working in small batches. So when we have large batches of work, it takes a long time. There's a lot of delays and a lot of handoffs. The way we're organized is we're organized in silos. There's a business analyst team. They do requirements. Another team does testing. Another team does development, etc. With Agile, we're doing all this work together as a team, and we can develop end-to-end functionality without having to have handoffs. We work in small increments, in short time boxes, like 2 weeks, where we're delivering value every 2 weeks. So it's an incremental and iterative method. That's what Agile is all about. And it's also a mindset, and how can we get things done quicker? How can we get feedback quicker? How can we get interaction with customers? How do we interact as a team and be more cohesive together? Because in traditional project management, there's a lot of handoffs. There's not a lot of collaboration that happens in that method.
I guess the thing that was disappointing about what we saw is that end user customers inside the organizations didn't like what was delivered to them, and in fact, they had to throw away an entire database, like almost a year's worth of work and start over because there were errors or this or that.
And this was using Agile methods or not using Agile methods?
I think the attempt was to use Agile methods. At least the language was similar. People would put in, as a user, I want to be able to blog.
So they write user stories,
Yeah,
right?
user stories. But people I was dealing with were like, I need something forecasting to budget. What my figure out what my budget's going to be next year, right? The big evidence that these guys don't like.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Yes, so they can't.
Sorry.
Yeah. So basically what he's saying is that they try to implement Agile methods there, but they're still having quite a few problems. So, and I just
Welcome to the world of Agile.
yeah.
Everybody's world.
Yeah, but what I think he's describing is something very common, in which is people think that they're implementing Agile, but they're really not being Agile. Whether it's the mindset, the way the teams have organized. Now, you even have to change your code over time to permit an Agile environment. So if you have very tightly coupled systems, it's going to be very hard to be Agile, because if you change this one thing, it's going to cause all these other knock-on effects. So we have to start actually architecting things to allow teams to work independently and then bring their solutions together. So there's a lot of stuff that happens, and this journey, it is going to take a while. And especially if you don't have the coaching and the training that's necessary to truly become Agile, you just can't do this on your own. You really need help from the outside.
I don't think these people want to be Agile. I think they want to just do what they've always done. And I think the top see other people doing stuff, and they want to make more money, and that's what people say, and then they buy a solution.
Right. So anyone have a solution for, what was your name?
Brian.
Brian. And anyone experience the same thing where, you know, the organization says that you want to be agile, but in reality, nobody really wants to change. I mean, what I normally find is, yeah, they want to be agile, but they don't want to give up their old ways of working. They still want to have budgets, conform to budget. So
It's like CMM and ISO. Management says, I want to go do this because it's going to really help, but then they won't make the commitment to some of the things you talked about, being agile leadership, building teams the right way, restructuring, integrating new DevOps. I mean, they don't want to do that. So
right.
it really depends on leadership.
I think sometimes you can build bridges. So finding out what it is that's holding them to the old patterns. So in my experience, sometimes it's, I'm used to seeing things in a certain way. I'm used to looking at a plan in a certain way. And so for a period of time and in a certain way, in using the tools that you've got, you can sometimes take the plan that you're executing against in Jira, for example, and you can turn it into a project plan.
A waterfall
in
plan.
Microsoft.
Yeah.
And you can represent it that way to kind of ease them into it. It doesn't last well, like you can't do that in the long run, but I have used tools like that to create bridges so that people
So
feel comfortable.
you do your Jira, and then you also do a Gantt chart or something like that?
Yeah, you just export it and put it into a Gantt chart.
Right. And a tool like Jira does not make you agile. If you use version 1, if you use Computer Associates Agile Central, those tools don't make you agile. It's the mindset, it's the thinking that makes you agile. Doing agile ceremonies doesn't make you agile. It's the way you work, it's the way you think, it's the way you behave that truly makes you agile. And it's not something that's easily done internally unless there's a lot of internal motivation for really wanting to change the way you work.
You mentioned a challenge that I've run into, the technical challenge where you've got lots of systems that are tightly coupled,
Right.
and that makes it very difficult to go agile without making the changes to those systems. So can you describe the path? How do we get from where we are with tightly coupled systems, wanting to do agile, to systems that better support agile?
Right. So to me, it's the art of the possible. You know, and start thinking about, and mainly the team members will always come up with the best ideas.
So to try and answer that, right?
Yeah.
So first you identify, and I like one of the principles he said is identify the coordination points, you call them. Collaboration points, right? You know, where are these tightly bounded interfaces between those systems, right? And then pick one and get a good architect and a team willing to work on it, where you can, in effect, put a wrapper around that one tightly coupled interface and turn it into a REST API or some kind of interface that decouples it in effect. And it boils down to software development. You have to have well-defined, well-bounded context and well-defined promises between people, and that architectural decision has to be made by people who really know what they're doing and what the interfaces are. And that's one of the areas where I see Agile sort of not addressing all the time. I mean, I think it addresses a lot of things, but he's raising a really good point. The hard point is the architectural issues that are causing these collaboration points and these bottlenecks and extra pieces of cooperation that need to occur.
Yeah, and that's why we recently have added this, what we call this new competency called team and technical agility. Because we have forgotten about all the technical practices that really made Agile work in the first place that you found in XP. So I don't know if you ever guys have ever heard the SOLID principles that were developed by Robert C. Martin.
Clean code.
The Clean Code book, great book, Clean Code, and he talks about how to develop your modules such that, for example, if you have something that's changing often, don't have other things depend on something that's going to change often. So he has like 5 principles of SOLID that he talks about. So I think one of the most important things that I would do is I would create unit tests for what you currently have today, so that you can refactor that code to start being decoupled and to start using microservices and to put the wrappers around there so that you can then change the code with high confidence that you're not going to break anything, because your unit tests or your behavioral-driven tests are going to show that you broke something if you have a problem.
So the only, like, I agree with everything you said. The one word I'm going to pick on is unit tests.
Yeah.
That's not the right point. You want good end-to-end tests and test it. Test the functionality of the service and ensure it delivers the right performance.
Absolutely, that's why I
That's
said
the only, sorry.
behavioral-driven tests.
Everything else was spot on.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So you need to have both.
So
You
I'd
need
like
have
to
both.
add what we're doing.
Go ahead,
Well,
please.
now, let me say that, so we are doing what you're talking about piecemeal, looking at a functionality that we can abstract as a service. The challenge, in my experience, is that devoting resources to doing that kind of work, and I come from a product development background, not IT, takes away time from doing features. So there's a key business decision that has to be made. The way we are, some of the work we're doing is when we're on, say, greenfield product or greenfield modules or something like that, the plan is to build the abstraction and then build like a plugin so that the effort and work can be tied into the new initiative. So instead of drawing attention to, we have to refactor this thing in our other product, the intention is we have to enable where we want to get to with more decoupled products, and we're going to do that within this context of this new project.
So you also nail one of the toughest challenges of changing the culture that I see, or I'm seeing too, which is, oh, great, but I'm the squeezed middle manager. I've got to deliver new features for the business, right? Why am I paying for this technical debt, right? And I think part of it is, and this is not mine, I was just reading from somebody else, incumbent on like the engineers and software to start talking business language and explain why it makes business sense to do this, right? And make a business case, because otherwise, like, why am I spending money on this? You're not delivering any features to the customers? That's the biggest pushback I get.
Right,
And you can give all the long-term benefits in the world, but
Right.
sometimes it falls on deaf ears.
So one of the things that we recommend in a framework is that you allocate a certain percentage of the Agile Release Train's time towards technical debt and improving the system, so that each and every program increment, we are improving the system and we're still delivering features. The business needs to know if we want to move faster, then we have to have a faster train.
How do you convince the business of that? That's the challenge. I mean, I love it, but
Yeah, because we have to explain to them what's going to happen if we continue down the same path that we are now. Things are going to be slow and they're going to be error prone. So we have to make some investment in our system to make it faster. And it's when they start when you have the business and you have technology working together during planning and inspect and adapt, when they're intimately involved, they then see these problems firsthand, and then they start willing to get changed. They start to have empathy for that. But I can understand that they don't think it's valuable. But do you want to go faster? Well, we have to fix our car to go faster.
So I'll just have an example, which, let's see how you react to it. So I was at Pi Gotham a couple weeks ago, and somebody built a machine learning model deployment. Oh, sorry. Yeah, okay. So I was at Pi Gotham a few weeks ago. Somebody built a machine learning, deployed a machine learning model on a serverless architecture.
Is that on?
Completely, I don't know.
Put it closer to your thing.
Yeah.
Is it okay? Yeah. Pi Gotham, a guy presented, he deployed a machine learning model on serverless technology. He didn't use glue and expensive stuff. He did it in Lambda. It worked. His GitHub is up there, and it went right past IT. It went right past everybody. And so, so I don't know who I'm talking to here, but that makes sense. The money is right there. It's like, oh, it didn't cost me anything. It cost me this guy's salary and his time and nothing else. And it's like, okay, I'm not trying to blow the ocean, but it certainly would be a very stark contrast to what they're doing now and how much it costs and how long it takes.
Okay, good. All right, thank you for that.
Sure.
Program manager, how to bring more scale and alignment to the same goals. So one of the things that we do in SAFE is that all the teams share a common program backlog, and this represents the backlog here. And all the teams work off of that common backlog. We also have PI planning, where all the teams on the trains get together, and we are planning against that common backlog for a certain set of features. We use a Kanban to get those features ready for the upcoming PI, so we understand what they mean and what's expected. We can develop an hypothesis for that feature to understand, okay, how do we test this hypothesis so that we're really going to get the benefits? How do we know when we're making progress towards the benefit hypothesis? Because we can say you need to get these benefits, but we all know what happens. You don't get the benefits. So you have to do some testing, and you want to incrementally fund things so that you're not spending a lot of money without seeing that you are making progress to those results. So that's some of the ways that we get alignment. Also, the program we have a product manager who works with multiple product owners, and they get aligned that way. We have a meeting called a product owner sync, or PO sync, in which they are meeting together to get everyone on the same page. Okay, what is SAFE about? So that's a great question. So what SAFE is about is creating a system in which we can do lean and agile throughout the whole organization. And we do this one train at a time, one portfolio at a time. So a portfolio is basically a portfolio of solutions. It's not a project portfolio, it's not a program portfolio, it's a portfolio of solutions. And you'll see up there where it says value streams. A value stream represents a solution, a service, the steps on how you get from concept to cash. So it implements lean and agile practices and systems thinking and a lot of different things that work together as a cohesive system. These practices and roles and different events to cause alignment. What we want to have as much as possible is decentralized decision-making, decentralized execution, so that teams can move fast. Otherwise, we're always escalating things, and we have to get permission. We want empowered teams, we want empowered trains, so that they can move with a lot of speed. So those are some of the main things. It's really about the core values, the mindset, and the principles, and really creating a system which its goal is to deliver value in the shortest sustainable time. That's what SAFE is all about. SAFE 4.6 brings these 5 competencies, starting with lean agile leadership. That's the foundation for SAFE. The leaders must understand the core values, the mindset, and the principles in order to implement SAFE. And part of their job, this is the second half of their job, is to help lead the implementation and also get the help they need, usually SAFE program consultants, both internal and external. You want to build them both, and that's one of the new competencies. Team and technical agility. This competency is all about we build real teams, we build real trains, and we start using good quality practices, from design quality to release quality to build quality. All sorts of different quality practices are in this competency, team and technical agility, and there is advice on how you can do that. DevOps. You can't have DevOps without Agile. And Agile also depends on DevOps. I used to work with some really large banks, and they would develop their software in a couple of months, but it took them 6 months or a year before everything was released in production. So DevOps is really important. Now we talk about another thing called release on demand. And that means not every organization can do continuous delivery, nor is it desirable in many cases. Customers just can't consume all that new functionality. So release on demand means is that we constantly continually develop and we deploy in production, but we don't release it until we're ready to release, and we use feature toggles to turn on and off functionality to enable that release on demand. So there's a lot of stuff you need to do to be able to release on demand, and this talks about test automation, all the different practices that are required to get to the point where you can release on demand. And then if you're developing F-22s, large ships, things that are using hardware and software together, then you need this competency here is how to build large solutions and use lean systems engineering. So hardware and software together is always tough. So that competency talks about that. And finally, the last competency is lean portfolio management. How do we manage a portfolio of solutions? And we're getting more and more into product management here as well. So for example, when you look at your organization and you have different solutions, some of them probably need to be retired. How often does a solution in your organization get retired? Probably like never, right? I still have applications running on the mainframe at CBS that I wrote 30 years ago are still running. So you need to look at your all your solutions and categorize them into, well, this is new stuff for the future. This is emerging stuff. This is stuff that we're really making a lot of money from. But that won't last forever. So you always need to look at different horizons of planning and looking to make sure that you have solutions where in these different stages, so you're constantly bringing up new revenue streams. So that's what the portfolio is about. And it's lean budgets. Instead of budgeting projects, we budget a value stream, which is basically a train or multiple trains in that value stream. And so we're not budgeting individual projects. We want to keep these group of people together for long periods of time, and we just constantly feed them new work. We don't have to have the overhead of a project, and I'm sure everyone here loves time reporting. So you don't have to have time reporting. You can still do CapEx without time reporting in a much better way. So that's what that level is about. And now we also have added a new government icon, because SAFE not only works in private sector, but it also works in the public sector. So that's a very quick overview.
Quick question, just about
Yeah.
your unit test. So if it's not broke, usually they don't fix it. And so when you said unit test, are you talking about a concept like we're going to test the system, the components of the system, and we're not going to replace something until it slows down the big new thing with it?
Well, what unit testing is about is it's about that I, as a developer, want to make sure that the code is doing what I intended it to do. So we write an automated test,
Right.
and the best thing is to write that test first, then write the code to pass that test. And so these unit tests, along with behavioral-driven tests, allows us to test both that the system is doing what we said it was doing, and it's also fit for purpose. It's doing what the end users want to do. And when you have those suite of tests, you can move faster because you know that before you move something to production, you're running all these tests to make sure that you didn't break anything.
Yeah, I guess what I was asking about, we can skip over this, is if there's very little incentive to replace something that isn't broken, that works, unless the benefit of doing it is high enough to pay somebody to actually do it, and then it'll keep giving you the money
Right.
in the future.
But one of the things that we recommend as part of our technical agility is that you need to refactor your code. So when you initially developed a certain program, it worked just great for that purpose. Now you've added to it and added to it and added to it, and now anytime you try to add more code to it, maybe it slows down, or you can't even understand the spaghetti code that's there anymore. So you want to refactor your code to make it more readable and for it to execute faster. And that's like a basic hygiene that you do. And it's not something that you only do when things break. You have to allocate certain amount of time for that.
So Richard, let's try to wrap up. And
Okay.
if you just could share some success stories with us.
Right, so I actually think that
If you don't mind, can I?
we've answered all
ask
those
question?
questions. Sure.
Um,
Is that okay?
Yeah.
We talked about safety and security. Do this framework have some kind of a checklist such that team can validate it? Okay, I did this right. I failed here. There is area of improvement here. Number one. Number two is, does this framework publishes some lessons learned and how the agile teams tried and they failed with the justification of what was the reason behind it, which other team could refer.
Right. So in some of our case studies, they'll describe things that they tried and where it worked and where it didn't work. So you can look in our case studies, but the framework itself doesn't have like a lessons
Checklist.
learned or a checklist. And I'm kind of leery of checklists because you don't want to be in, okay, if we just follow this checklist, then everything will be perfect. You know, the checklist won't cover many situations that come up. And that's where the principles and the values and the lean thinking come into play, is that you get a certain thinking in mind and you don't necessarily use a checklist. Now, in terms of a checklist, the thing that comes closest to that would be your acceptance criteria, your definition of done. But you know, we don't really have a checklist. We also, with each of these competencies, we're having a self-assessment. And I think where you're going might be this, is that with this self-assessment, you can compare yourself to other organizations who are similar to you.
Did you point out in the beginning, I wasn't here at the beginning, that this framework, this web page is clickable on all these icons?
That's correct.
And so underneath this website is probably 1,000 pages worth of reading material?
It's about this many pages right here, because this is the safe reference guide, and this is a printout of the website.
So you can go to town and read all kinds of stuff here, including that book, which you wrote, I think, right?
Yeah, I'm the co-author of that book.
But the thing I did want to point out in terms, not so much as a checklist, but we talked about cultural change and setting ourselves up for success. To the right of the leadership competency, you have kind of a roadmap, preparation to launch. And it talks about the steps that I think you found to be that increase the probability of success if you're trying to go down the road here a little bit, right? So they actually have this little game like.
Yeah, it looks like kind of like shoots and ladders, right?
Yeah. And a nice place to start is to kind of look at what they're talking about there to make sure that you have some essential things under your belt, perhaps.
Right. So it's basically a pattern of how to implement SAFe. It's not the only pattern. There are many patterns to implement SAFe. In the framework, what we try to do is provide at least one pattern that we know that works, and then you adapt that for your own organization. Because it's not always going to be 100% fit, maybe 70% fit, 80% fit, but then you use the principles and values to guide you into adapting the framework and adapting the roadmap. Thank you for pointing that out. Somebody else had a question? Yeah.
Yeah, hi. So talking about like upper management, when they're deciding that for them everything is all about cost. Right?
Yeah.
So between all the different frameworks that are out there, has there been any like benchmarking done between the frameworks to figure out which one is most cost effective? From a very simple project to a very sophisticated project. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not aware of any studies, and I think one of the biggest problems with having that kind of study would be how do you compare implementations? Because you can compare one implementation of SAFe with another implementation of SAFe, and you can have very different results. In one case, leadership was heavily engaged, and they did training, and they had coaching and mentoring, and the other one didn't. So there's so many variables that I think it would be very difficult to do such a study and get any kind of